Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining. I am very excited to introduce Pablo, one of the co-founders of Diva, and he is going to be talking about liquid staking, permissionless liquid staking, and DVT. So give it up for Pablo.
So thank you, everybody, for coming. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about how liquid staking and DVT intersect in a way I think is very, very interesting and creates new possibilities. So what Diva staking is doing is building an unstoppable liquid staking protocol where you have the all familiar liquid staking on one side. You can use it just to get your LST, wrap it, and rebasing and rebasing. But the main difference here is that in Diva, all the operations are powered by permissionless operators that anybody can run. So anybody can run our node from one ETH. And that's using DVT to kind of support each other and cut the possible risk of validation. And for that, it uses distributed cryptography and is secured by collateral. So the main things you can do with Diva is you can stake your ETH and hold it to get your network rewards, say 4%. You can use that ETH on DeFi in a liquid way, or you can lock it to run a node in this kind of more risk-averse or more like a kind of running a node kind of mode. So where we are today is Diva is pre-launch. We recently launched an early staker program, which attracted $42 million in TVL. There is a testnet running. I'm going to show a little bit how that works. And there's also an active DAO, which has been like helping curate the direction of the protocol. So Diva is designed to be a little bit different than everything else. So it's designed to avoid every point of failure or every point where a human could interfere. So Diva doesn't have any whitelists. It doesn't have any multisigs, no oracles, no guardians, no DAO fees. It's simply a way where people can either become a liquid staker or an operator and find a balance between that. The way I like to tell the story of this design is there is the Ethereum proof of stake in the beginning. And then with Lido, we got liquid staking, which relies on a today proof of authority model. And I know that these models are constantly evolving, and we're all trying to improve. But today it's relying on a list of whitelisted operators. With Rocket Pool, this setup went fully permissionless. But to go permissionless, it means that you need to also provide a way where operations are collateralized. And today, that's using a model where each mini pool or validator is run by one operator. And the evolution that Diva does to this is it becomes distributed. So instead of having one key per validator, we have multiple nodes operating together using DVT, each validator. And that opens a lot of possibilities. I like to think about it a bit as a layer 2 for staking, because it gives you all these advantages of high availability together with this ability to rewrite the rules. So I like to say there's liquid staking, there's economically trustless, like Rocket Pool, and there's distributed validation. And when you combine these three, that's kind of the architecture that Diva is going for. So in a comparison, what you will see is that on the staker side, it's very similar. There's no minimum amount. You can get a liquid staking token. You do use a smart contract. That's, I think, common to everybody. Where things get a bit more interesting is on the operator side, because we map this one validator, one key, and by breaking that paradigm, we managed to lower that collateral from around 10 ETH in total value for Rocket Pool, which is one of the lowest, to one ETH per key share. And I like to think of this spectrum kind of where we lay in terms of accessibility. So we ran a little bit some numbers, and what we discovered is that there's a lot more people that are today holding 1 to 10 ETH than people with 32 ETH and more. And the potential, if we manage to lower this collateral barrier to entry, is that we could be onboarding about 10 more people to staking, which I think can be very powerful. And I think that can help us reverse a little bit this trend of centralization that we see in the higher GDP regions. The technology behind that is distributed key generation using multi-party computation. So in Diva, every time a validator creates a key, it does that in a distributed way, where each node generates a key, providing collateral, and it uses a consensus of 2 out of 3 for signing. That means that it's much more resilient to failures if there's a data center or somebody goes off or there's a bug. But it also opens this possibility to be self-healing. So if we lose one key, the network can detect that key is missing and create a new one, so the network can recover 100% liveliness. So there's many advantages. I'm going to go a little more in detail into what those models look like. But first, the architecture looks a bit like this. So you have on one side the stakers and the smart contract, and that creates a validator whenever it's possible. And the way operators connect is basically operators keep a balance with a smart contract on their collateral. And they say, look, I would like to collateralize up to 100 ETH, or 10 ETH, or 1 ETH. Will you give me keys? And what that does is every time a new operator can be created, keys get distributed to the sufficiently collateralized operators. These operators connect via peer-to-peer network. So there's no topology, there's no structures or a given kind of topology of network, but instead they kind of reign evenly. And that means there's a more fair and random distribution. One interesting component as well, which we won't go into detail, is a zero-knowledge proof rewards oracle, which the team is developing, and that removes yet one more element of trust. But kind of what we're trying to do is go back to this really strict design that's trust minimized. So I mentioned there's 16 nodes operating each single validator. The threshold is 66%. That means that up to 5 nodes can go offline at any moment without impacting operations. If you were to slash, that would require also a consensus of enough people. So accidental failure has much less impact mathematically. And there's a few specific cases that we can look into. So the motivation for this is because there is solo staking, there is centralized, there is liquid staking. I think there's a lot of potential in liquid staking because it allows for this specialization. But if you look today, we're still far from reaching the decentralization we would like. And if you look today at the 3 top staking pools, they're still controlling over 50%. So it's really important that every model that we look into is not only trust minimized, but also that has good incentives and scalability to be able to kind of become a major solution. So the main problem that Diva is trying to fix is how do you remove that trust from the node operator? Because when you're staking with somebody, you're essentially trusting them or yourself. And with the rocket pool model of bonding, what you have is you have one single person responsible, and they're posting collateral for that, but you still have that with individual entities. So once you start crisscrossing these responsibilities, everything becomes a little more versatile. But you could also say there's also bad parts to that, which is that if that becomes a lot cheaper, the network attack could paradoxically become easier because you could have less bond. So it's very important that when we design these risk models, that we do it with the awareness that by lowering these barriers, we could be making attacks easier. So yeah, this is something that the team has put a lot of work into how to be Sybil resistant and how to protect against each of the possible failures. So I'm going to showcase just a few things that might be interesting technically. This comes from a talk that you can see online. It's called The Magic Behind Distributed Validators by Prada, CEO Samir, who's somewhere at the event. And this is a bit more technical. But the way validators are created needs to be random because there's a certain kind of attack, which if you would want to control the network, you could simply provide a lot of collateral and start receiving all the keys and then start signing. So to prevent this, the architecture in Diva is using some on-chain randomness where operators who have enough collateral are playing a kind of on-chain lottery to see who can receive those keys. And when they play this lottery, that ensures a fair and completely random distribution, which, is much more secure, although it can be frustrating for those of you running testnet and who are still waiting for keys. But kind of the result of this process is that you end up with a bunch of signers who end up having keys to different groups of validators, and that ensures that it's much more resistant to take over. We have this analogy as well that DVT is to validation, like MPC is to custody. When you use MPC threshold signatures, you need to collect all the co-signatures in order to transfer. But when you use that for validation, it's so much more complicated. because you need to be doing that continuously, all the time, on time, with latency impacts, with different clients behind. So this is a very hard problem to solve, but we also think it's very worth it, because when you look at what is the impact, we are going to look here just at the downtime improvement. But if you have a node which is very bad, it has 5% downtime, what you would have is something like this, where it looks very spotty. So what we're visualizing here is that we have 16 different nodes, and each one is down 1/20th of the time. That would be, in my mind, like an office where employees are constantly sick. But what this team validation allows you to do is that because the threshold is much higher, when you have this group that is constantly failing, the combined entity, the team, never fails. That office never closes, and it can always provide service in a timely manner. And I think that's what we're after when we talk about resiliency in validation. And here's a way to visualize how increasing the DVT set size has an exponentially increasing benefit in terms of uptime. Obviously, there's also cost to that. So there's a point where it's enough. I think that's why the 16 is a good number. And when you visualize that in terms of where uptime is in the network, what you can see is that this is distribution of current inactivity percentages. You can substantially improve that beyond the level even of professional validators in a theoretical level. So I think that's a very clear image. There's another one which I like, which is in terms of slashing protection. So if you have a 33% client bug, everything's lost because of the correlation penalty. Not great. If you have a 10% client bug and you're affected by one of your clients, then you could have a loss of up to 30% in those validators. But when you're aggregating behind, that diversity now has a whole other dimension, which is if you're running a diverse validator set behind your DVT, your loss, even if you're affected by a 20% client bug, could potentially be 0. And that's because you have a consensus before you go to mainnet. So that's really interesting. And again, just another example. So we're at ETHStaker. We can talk about how to run a node. So to install Diva, for those of you curious to try, it's today running on Gurley. So it's just a Docker package with a Docker Compose. You can install it. In the future, you'll deposit collateral to activate the validators, and then you get these additional operator rewards. We built this web UI that looks like quite friendly, and the idea is to appeal to home stakers who maybe don't have that much experience and to really give them the simplest possible version. And again, the difference is where on Ethereum you would need 32 ETH, on Diva you need 1. Mapping of 1 key is now 16. You have the consensus protection, you get the liquid staking, and you get the distributed generation. So in a way, it's like everything that Ethereum staking does, Diva kind of extends. For those of you wanting to run it, it runs on top of an Ethereum full node. So you can run your existing setup, can connect it to that. And the Diva client itself is very lightweight. And basically, it manages everything for you. There's no need to create the keys. Everything's done behind the client. So again, there's these 3 journeys. I think a lot of you will be interested in the run a node version. So yeah, if you're curious, you can play with the testnet. Maybe, yeah, if you're curious about the process, it looks like this. In the simplest way, you could provision a VPS. Hopefully, you use your own machine, git clone, and then there's kind of a 2-step install process, and you will be running. There's already some great tooling that somebody in the community, Petros, did, where you can play, see like what's active or not, and that's quite nice to see. And what we've been doing as well, for those of you who don't run nodes but are active on DeFi, is Diva has had some pre-launch early staker initiatives. So if you have ETH, there's 2 ways to participate. There's an Enzyme Vault where you can deposit either ETH or STETH, and that would, once Diva launches, it will be unstaked from Lido or just staked directly into Diva, and that will also give you Diva allocations. So anybody who wants to support the launch somehow, there's a very simple way on chain. Or if you're running mainnet validators and you're looking to kind of transition and get some of these advantages, there's also a validator migration initiative where you simply signal that you want to move, you sign a transaction, non-custodially, and later you can do it. So that's a bit what we're doing. You can learn everything at divastaking.com, and a lot of us are here. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the audience?
Thank you. Nice talk. I wanted to know, so usually you would like to run multiple validators in one single cluster, and I was curious about how many, in terms of scaling, how many validators have you tested running on the same cluster together? It's possible to run hundreds of validators, maybe thousands of validators in the same cluster?
So we don't have an exact number or recommendation, but because Diva connects to an existing Ethereum node, I expect the bottleneck would probably be in that node. So I would say probably hundreds or thousands, but it hasn't been tested extensively yet. My recommendation would be that you don't put more than 1,000 ETH per machine, just out of economic sense.
Any more questions? Alrighty. Well, let's give another big applause
so
for Pablo.